Just want to say hi to everybody. We're going live on TikTok and Facebook to get a recording and to just document our cultural protocols we started last week. So just wanted to acknowledge all our elders around the country and acknowledge them. I'd like to acknowledge the elders that have taught me along my journey over the years. I learnt from my mob at Toomala, learnt from mob at Manningrida, NT, Bari mob even, Rainy Day Broom mob, and Anangor mob as well. So I've kind of learnt over the years from different mobs as well as my own mob. So what we covered last week on our first session was our cultural protocols. So if you can see the screen behind me, and I'm going to enlarge. And these are common cultural protocols that we were looking at that come across all our communities. So we did last week, first and the second point. First point, just to recap, understand and respect the many Aboriginal languages and tribal systems still existing, as well as the many Aboriginal English recognised dialects. So just understanding the dynamics of all our Aboriginal people around Australia. Second point is respect elders, which is consistent and it seems to be a core component of our culture from every mob, and that's what we looked at last week. So now we're going to go on to the next points, which is permissions, mandate, and to make really clear here, we're at point 4, men's and women's business, separate jurisdictions. We're not touching it because it's for public. Basically, we're only touching public consumption only, so yeah, we'll have a look at that directly, but we're not looking at the cultural side whatsoever. Representation, point 5, nations and clans, families represent and speak for themselves. Very important point. And cultural sensitivities. I have to push through all these points tonight because I can't kind of like finish halfway because the whole lot is cultural sensitive, pretty much. And we want to be able to kind of make sense of it. On TikTok, there'll be an opportunity for Mob to jump on and yarn, but I just want to quickly get through to these points. I'm not going to waffle or anything like that. I'm going to go straight through and yeah, just press on from here. So let's go to point 3. So cultural permission. Cultural permission is really important in Aboriginal culture. Cultural permission ties in the respect code, which is what we looked at last week. Seeking permission of elders and traditional owners, native title or cultural custodians. Acquiring permission for public cultural activities. Objective is to make sure that you have a cultural right to proceed an activity. So to identify what the activity is, make clear of that objective when you're identifying that activity to your elders. Seek the elder and community member support, and then stick to the gender at the event for the activity. Therefore, because that is what you're getting permission for. So I'll just bring that in a bit. That's standard for all mobs, seeking permission. Okay, this is something that I didn't really want to cover, but because of cultural protocols and the nature of what we're doing, I am going to just mention it but move on, and it's kind of not up for discussion later because this is culturally sensitive. So, setting parameters around existing tribal systems protocols. So, basically, for an activity, say if it's requiring cultural dance, which is a lot of the times, we're asking for mob to um, steer away from colours of cultural materials that reflect the status of tribal systems. For example, red ochre, red band, and the yellow ochre, and they represent status in tribal society, and we would like to see that only represented for tribal mob who have earned that status. Okay, there are many tribal groups around in Australia still continuing the old cultural system. Um, Goes across 3 states and 1 territory, NT of course, Queensland, right across their big systems. So these cultural protocols or practices are still being practiced in large quantities of land in Australia. So basically cultural sensitivities, that is cultural sensitive. A lot of cultural sensitive stuff is not up for discussion because it is what it is, especially when it's set out by tribal people. Can't discuss whys or whatever. Other areas of cultural sensitivities that affect our mob is sorry business, cultural business, and men's issues or women's issues on a public consumption. So these are the that's the bits that I wanted to pass through. And so what I would like to do to see on TikTok is to open up for mob to have a discussion because apparently there's been a request. So just checking, Ombi, you still with me? You are. Okay. So is anybody wanted to have a discussion while I'm live? There was what I basically wanted to do is go through what we're doing straight into next week, and we can cover some of that now, is going into cultural safety. This is where it's all going into. So basically, the whole point of driving these protocols, or just alerting mob to know what practices are still happening for mob to make sure we steer clear of breaches, and we don't want to breach at all. None of us do. So sometimes breaches happen accidentally. And so if we just set up some of these kind of basic, they're just basic, just cultural consumption and know anything past, it might give people a guidance of not breaching, and then going into cultural safety, because what we'd like to do is move towards cultural safety where our mob can celebrate NAIDOC events and what have you, and do cultural dances that are culturally safe, therefore public consumption and safe for audience to see. So if we're looking at, say, the reasons why these cultural protocols are important for cultural safety is we come off a very old tribal system. In many parts of Australia, that old tribal system is still existing. Old tribal dances that have many different meanings and powers, and we have seen in the past where breaches have happened, and cultural breaches, if people are ripping off dancers or ripping off, culture, I want people to understand that impacts on the people who was ripped off, the mob who have the cultural rights and the cultural ownership, the intellectual property, the customary rights, the whole everything rights for that for their cultural content. And sometimes when people steal stuff, they don't realise they're stealing from a direct family or a direct person or a direct mob, and sometimes that dance has never been done public before, and so forth. So there are real good reasons why we shouldn't be stealing dances, especially when some of them aren't really. Sometimes there's special circumstances where mob will allow a dance to be shown publicly, and it's not necessarily always a public for public, but they'll share because they're sharing culture. So it's very important not to touch anybody what they're displaying from their mob, because they could be very powerful and very important and very sacred dances. And some of these dances have been passed on for generation and generation and generation and generation and thousands of years. And so they've been held, you know, um, in the hands of our tribal mob, because we all come from tribal culture, and they've been held in the hands of our tribal mob and kept safe over many years. So we'd like to keep the sacredness and the safeness of that, because at the moment cultural safety is not really being happening to the level that we need it to happen around Australia. Um, so yeah, when it comes to cultural safety, moving into that too, um, we would do with mob who do want to dance or do want to celebrate, which I do believe everyone has the right to celebrate our culture because we have survived. I do think, I mean, I can't do it, but I think it needs to be looked at or just highlighted that we do need to look at culturally safe pathways for dancers, you know, for children to celebrate NAIDOC events at schools even. So I think what we need is a package of culturally safe dances suitable for our children, and just yeah, suitable for mob who would love to just lift up our culture and paint up or whatever on a NAIDOC event or any other Aboriginal event. And like I said last week, a lot of the mob my age know this stuff. Um, this is pretty general knowledge for mob my age with cultural protocols, is this and way more. But this is just an introduction to, I guess, writing some of it down, the public consumption only, to kind of guide the young ones who some of them haven't had the same experiences as, say, myself or others growing up, because, and that is not their fault, it's just the fact that we got colonised and they're still colonising us and it hasn't stopped. So, and because they haven't stopped, they still want to land and they still want control and they still want everything. And our culture's kind of, you know, we're getting hammered under all this. I think it's very important why we've still got our elders and our guidance and all our mob around to just get our public consumption stuff right. And so at least when we present at native events or schools or whatever, we can guarantee cultural safety to everybody. Because if we was to do wrong way dances, for example, not only the people who are dancing them can get sick, the people who visualise or get to see that could. So I think from here on, cultural safety is about everybody. It's about those who are practicing or sharing, you know, their experience of their own cultural identity. We want that done safely for them as well. Cultural safety will goes into mental health, goes into spiritual as well, and physical health, of course, most importantly, which is pretty much like a cultural anti-bullying policy. Um, That'll be next week, where we'll start looking at that. But the disputes and conflict resolution, we just be looking at that next week as well. That's just more like how our mob deal with stuff, and also because this is going to be like a PDF, like an ebook, I guess. Because I'm writing it as I go each week. This will be made public for mob as well. So I'm up to, yeah, I just wrote this up until here yesterday, and then I'll be writing along here in the next few days to finish for next week, and then make this document public. And the reason why it's taken me 4 years to actually get to this document, because it's a bit of a job to do. Um, and I think the timing as well, like with what's been happening at us politically, I think it's kind of time that we do have a go at getting this. But there are a lot of Aboriginal communities that already have their own cultural protocols existing. Um, a lot of, yeah, so this is not the first time. This is just me having a go looking at, the public sector for um, which we engage ourselves in a lot. And I've had, complaints from mob how they felt culturally unsafe on public platforms. Say TikTok is one at the moment, but that them issues have been existent on social media for a long time, and a lot of the older generation have found strategies on how to deal with that. And so with the young mob, it's this will be a great guide for young mob to be able to handle themselves when they're doing their own discussions or their own mob cultural, yarns. I think these protocols will be a great helper for them to put their, to say, we're going to put our foot down, and we're going to have cultural sensitivity on this discussion. So we're not going to allow extra people to come in so they can't get hijacked and unbalance their dynamics. So I think it will be a great tool for young ones. The older ones will be practicing this stuff anyways because they know it. And yeah, again, putting this at the end, it is a human right to uphold and honour our cultural rights. It's okay, but it's also a human right, and we must honour it because it's very sacred culture, oldest on record in the world, and yeah, we just want to make sure going into the future, past, way past when I'm gone and our elders are gone, we just want to make sure that there's a bit of a guide left for the next generations coming through who don't have the same experiences on land, etc. But really strictly, I'm talking quite gently about this, but very strictly, I'll go back to, where is that, point 4. Let's put here. Point 4 on the cultural protocols. Men's and women's business are separate jurisdictions, and basically is out of jurisdiction. I might need to rewrite this to make that a bit more clearer because it's just, I'm trying to articulate, I guess, in English when I'm thinking in a cultural context. How to translate this into an English, is quite hard. But basically, it men's and women's business is referred to is out of jurisdiction to public consumption. Is out of jurisdiction. Yeah, for it's only It's not for public consumption. But what we do have, the reason why it's mentioned, because it's still part of our culture, so it's still a protocol. It's mentioned also in regards to we have principles that are coming off, where today in normal settings where men will speak for themselves and women will speak for themselves, and it's not considered normal for to to cross that. So it's still that's a principle coming off an old cultural system that's still practiced and still demanding of respect, I guess. So it does refer to um, like law business. That's what it's referred to, and again, not public. But the principles, yeah, women still have our cultural jurisdictions even in everyday settings, around the house and around community in everyday life, you know, that still is practiced and coming straight through from our culture. Okay, that's enough. There's quite a lot in there. Um, If there are any questions, I don't know if there's anyone requesting to speak or ask questions, but if that's not the case, we'll finish off pretty soon, Kish. Um, but if anyone has any questions, yeah.
Yeah, because I didn't put the boxes up. I was meant to.
Oh, that's fine.
Maybe yeah, next week I'll do that. Sorry.
Oh, that's right. That's why we didn't have people asking questions, and which is probably meant to be, Mum, because the whole topic was cultural sensitive. Next week is not cultural sensitive. It's a bit more, about strategies and so forth, but still running off um, cultural principles that we do, what our mob do, what we've been handed down. So yeah, that is the end of it. And but if there are any questions or if there's any feedback, um, yeah, please let us know. And I'm going to try and log off on Facebook first. Work this out. Ah, here I go. Alright, so I'm going to end.